Crystal and Saga debate trans 2024 importance. I do like, I feel like this has to be a conversational topic prompted by Saga, because there are a lot of so-called intellectuals on the right who are desperate to legitimize the idea that all of the $100 million they spent on pushing trans fear-mongering did anything to the electorate. You know, like, they're like, you know, no, it wasn't a total waste of time culture war talking point prompted entirely by us in a desperate effort to win voters. It was real. It was substantive. The importance of trans issues in American politics. Oh, God.
There's been a lot of discussion about some of the issues that swung people to Donald.
Crystal, I don't know how you do it, man. I mean, Crystal, I've given you shit for, like, legitimizing a platform that is fundamentally right-wing by being there. But I'm paying taxes to the U.S. government, and a solid, like, 33% of every donation that makes its way to me after YouTube and PayPal get their cut and the editors get their cut and White Nervosa gets their cut goes straight to an Israeli bomb. So, you know, maybe I'm not in a position to talk. You may be surrounded by right-wingers at the Hill. I'm surrounded by right-wingers in the country. I don't know.
Trump. Obviously, the economy and immigration are there, but some interesting new analysis says that also it could be cultural issues, specifically transgender issues, that had a major impact on swing voters. So we had a clip here from CNN we wanted to play that kind of highlights this
CNN
fight within both elite media and elsewhere, and how the issue may be talked about.
I'm surprised you haven't brought Crystal on the talk. I mean, the last time I talked to Crystal, it was in a pretty antagonistic context. I'll admit that I've softened on her a little bit over time, mostly because from a distance at the time, and especially because Crystal has adopted some pretty stupid positions, I felt like she was kind of doing like an Anna Kasparian bit. But now that I'm seeing Anna Kasparian do the bit, I didn't know why it was called the Anna Kasparian bit at the time, because Anna Kasparian was cool at the time. But now that Anna Kasparian has also done the Anna Kasparian bit, thus affirming why it was originally called the Anna Kasparian bit, I can see there's no comparison.
Now in the future, let's take a listen.
I think there are a lot of families out there who don't believe boys should play girls' sports.
They're not boys.
It's so cool how this issue, which affects literally no one. Again, to be clear, this is a fundamentally like anti-populist take. You know, you can't be a populist and then also say like, yeah, the 5 instances we know of trans women playing in women's leagues in high school or whatever, none of which have produced like a notable blowout. Like, this is a serious issue. You can't do this, okay? No one gives a shit. They only care because you keep talking about it.
I'm not going to listen to transphobia at this table. I am not going to listen to you call a trans girl a boy.
Also, criticism here at CNN. Big props to this fella for being an ally, but I really think the messaging that you should go for when you're talking to people who make points like this is not to say, like, I refuse to listen to transphobia because this is soy to the right. You should instead say, literally no one cares about this. It's a country of 350 million people. Can you name a single time that a trans athlete is blown, like, cis females out of the water? And if not, like, why do you care? Like, there literally anything is more of an issue than this. Lightning strikes kill more people than this. There's no, like, the idea that you are authentically concerned with it as opposed to it's just like a cheap gotcha for you to bring up every single time. Can you please give me an example, you know?
Be at this table. I am not going to listen to you call a trans girl a boy.
Are you going to allow me to finish my explanation?
When you use a word that's a slur, I'm going to interrupt. That's not how it is. They're not boys. They're not boys. They're not playing girls softball. I'm not going to sit there and listen to that.
Let's reset for a second, because, look, this is a really heated issue, right? And Sharmichael, I know you. I know that you understand that people have different views on this. I think out of respect for Jay, like, let's try to talk about this in a way that is respectful.
Okay, so let me rephrase.
More people have killed themselves listening to Breaking Points than there are trans kids comparing to respective sports. True! Can we deal with the real pandemic?
This, since I'm being targeted here.
I don't. Just to be clear, you are not being.
But I am. But it's okay.
I'm specifically saying that I know that you are not intending to be transphobic.
He should know that I'm not.
He is, of course. Obviously, don't like make apologies for him. Always with the whiny rhetoric.
He wants to.
I'm not calling you transphobic. I'm saying you're using a phrase that you know.
So
the way
unbutton your blazer, dude.
Interpret it.
That's not regular people. That's not regular people. There's no consensus that these are actually boys. This whole thing about trans girls is a canard. We're talking about a tiny sliver.
Okay, be clear. Like, we're not against this guy, you know.
Of the population.
That may be the
and
case,
we're using
but
that.
My point in terms of its effectiveness.
Hold on. Just Just get to your point.
My point in terms of its effectiveness, regular people with children look at these things and they say, you know what, this is a bit too far. I do not agree with this.
This is fascist rhetoric. Oh, I don't have any real arguments against this, but like normal non-degenerate people see this and they're disgusted. I don't have like any empirical basis both to like quantify the level of harm or the, you know, importance of the solutions. All I know is that it's degenerate.
I don't like this. I think Democrats are going way too much to the left on social issues. They're uncomfortable with it. A lot of people believe that.
This is, again, like no argument, no evidence, no point. Just like, yeah, the silent majority speaks to this. By the way, what this guy is saying is demonstrably untrue. People did not largely vote based on like trans issues. And to the extent they did, wouldn't you be more likely to blame, I don't know, the $100 million in Republican messaging? Even if like Joe Biden had snapped his fingers and I guess, yeah, and just like gotten rid of trans participation in sports, you know, Republicans still would have run on it, right? Like, you know, they lie, right?
A lot of families believe that. You may disagree with that reality, but that's why Republicans kept running those ads over and over and over again, because they saw the metrics suggested that they were working.
It's actually incorrect. Back in 2022, it was shown people didn't care about this as much as Republicans thought. Like, that you can manufacture a culture war. I like how it's always the left who is obsessed with culture war politics when the right is the one spending money on them. Democrats didn't talk about trans people at all this entire election cycle.
Ads over and over again and using rhetoric like you just used, saying this is boys playing girls sports. First of all, we're talking about 5 people in the entire country. We're talking about trans girls being allowed to play with the people who are in their gender. And if you don't believe, you don't have to listen to me. Listen to the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association.
The American Medical Association.
All right, so preview of...
You're not going to get any like ground with it. If you're talking to a fascist, which that guy was at least employing fascist rhetoric on the subject of trans people, you're not going to gain any ground by citing academic consensus. You know, you have to I think you have to attack like the fakeness of the point. You have to attack them for the insincerity, the meaninglessness of their arguments.
What Culture War 2.0 looks like now that this has happened. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is really the genesis, I think, of why this is even worth discussing. So this is from Blueprint, and this is, we've used some of their polling and stuff before, and they show the different issues that have animated different types of voters. So for example, if you look reason to...
Right. Kamala Harris is focused more on cultural issues like cultural issues like transgender issues rather than helping the middle class. This is easily debunked by the fact that no, she didn't. She literally never talked about them. She avoided talking about them to an almost like noteworthy degree. It's completely made up. It's fake. It's completely imagined. Kamala Harris didn't talk about social issues at all. It's how the voters in that poll felt, though. Yeah, because of nonstop, constant Republican propaganda. It has nothing to do with the actual behavior of Democrats. This is an objectively incorrect assessment by the people being polled, and the only way to address this is to cripple right-wing media. That's it. There's no change in Kamala Harris's behavior that could have changed, that could have like shifted this, because she literally did not talk about trans issues on the campaign trail. She didn't. Why did you post that twice in a row, F3, KF2? Well, Vosh, I would also say if Dems' rhetoric was strong on any issue, that would have not been as high. No. In this case, I don't think you can blame the Democrats at all. In this case, I think Democrats are literally completely blameless. I would have preferred it if Democrats had been more openly supportive of trans people in the election cycle. I don't think that like strategically withholding from talking about it did anything, clearly, because people on the right still assume that Kamala Harris is talking about trans people every day because they don't actually like watch Kamala Harris speak or listen to her interviews or anything. But I don't think there's any change in Kamala Harris's behavior that would have changed the outcome of this.
To not choose Kamala Harris. The number one issue for all voters was inflation was too high under the Biden administration. Number two was too many immigrants illegally crossed the border.
Counterpoint, nobody talks about Bernie like if his main thing is trans politics, though. Benjamin, this is the last time I'm responding. If Bernie Sanders had been running as the front runner in the general election, it would have looked the same. Trans people would have done, or sorry, Republicans would have done the exact same thing with trans people. It wouldn't matter if Bernie Sanders ever talked about him. An interviewer would ask Bernie Sanders if he supported trans people, and he would say, yes, of course I do, but we have to focus on American healthcare. And then that would get run in every swing state, and every swing state voter would be blanketed in, Republican attack ads talking about how Bernie Sanders supports putting all of their cisgender daughters up against 14-year-old trans girls who look like me. You know, This is entirely media environment. This is one of the issues the Democrats didn't fail on, because there's nothing they could have done to win outside of, again, like crippling the right-wing media apparatus. Maybe I just feel like the vacuum of a clear narrative gets filled by the right-wing narrative in the voter's mind. Yeah, but in this case, if she hadn't had a vacuum of a clear narrative, the clear narrative she would have had would have reaffirmed further this position.
Biden and Harris. So that makes sense. But actually, along the swing voters, this was, honestly, I was shocked by this. It says all swing voters, but specifically all swing voters who chose Trump. It said Kamala Harris is more focused on cultural issues like transgender issues rather than helping the middle class. That was a plus 28 score on Blueprint. Now, look.
Well, it's a good thing that the perceptions of voters often align with reality.
Let's be clear, people are not always the best in terms of why they vote. And I'm the most consistent messenger on that. So I'm not going to say that this is the #1 reason. But I mean, I do think this is a vindication, at least somewhat, of that ad, the they them ad that they blanketed the entire state of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin for, considering the margin and also considering that we have some of this data here and also even some of the reaction within the Democratic Party. So I'm curious what you think.
So I think that this type of analysis, which I have myself engaged in, which is basically like, let's focus group and poll test and get the voters to tell us in this paint by numbers way what we should believe in, I think it is worse than worthless. I think if you look at the campaign that the Kamala Harris...
I was too unkind to you, I feel. I was too unkind to you.
Team, actually put that chart back up on the screen. They basically ran the campaign designed, custom, like platonic ideal of the campaign that would be designed to try.
From a voter who chose Trump. In Scranton on Wednesday, Matt Wolfson, a 45-year-old former construction worker, looked around at poverty in the Rust Belt city and thought the nation needed a change in leadership. Wolfson said he didn't love the dictatorial aspect of Trump's personality, but thought it could help keep the country out of wars and maybe bring some peace in other conflicts, including Ukraine. He's good and bad. People say he's a dictator. I believe that. I consider him like Hitler, Wolfson said, but I voted for the man. And somewhere the noose around another chimpanzee's neck tightens. Another chimpanzee who's been taught to understand American politics meets their end.
Try to deal with these exact poll numbers. Inflation was too high. Okay, let me talk about my price gouging plan. Let me say I feel your pain. Too many immigrants illegally cross the border. Okay, don't worry. I'm hawkish on the border now. Those other things I said in the past, like forget all about that. Actually, I really am like more aggressive and hawkish on the border.
I do think that data like this, charts like this, can be really useful because you want to look at what people were dissatisfied with as a blueprint for how to improve things in the future. But you also need to have the good sense and wisdom to know the difference between something you actually made a mistake on and something that was entirely the product of enemy propaganda. Because otherwise you can't get like you can't be led around by the nose by Republicans. Otherwise they'll just construct attack ads that like shape you to be however, like literally however they want you to look. You know, you have to know, okay, how do you solve these issues? Inflation was way too high under the Biden-Harris administration. Right-wing media environment. Too many immigrants illegally crossed the border under the Biden-Harris administration. Media environment, but also Democrats legitimately stopped pushing back on anti-immigrant rhetoric, and for that reason, they created a much more right-wing environment generally. Wouldn't the mistake be trying to placate the media narrative? I can feel my patience on this subject wearing thin, so my blanket response to this is going to be, don't think, just listen. Don't question me, okay? If I'm saying it, it must be true. No, look, okay? Sometimes it's what you up on. Sometimes it's what the narrative they push, okay? On immigration, the Democrats up massively, but also there was a lot of propaganda. Transgender issues, entirely propaganda. Debt rose too much, entirely propaganda. A lot of this is also like the ability to aggressively soapbox, to stand up and like push your message to counter the narrative of the enemy, right? Right-wingers have a disproportionate control over the narrative because they're aggressive and loud, and Democrats are meek and giant pussies, so they don't really talk about the issues from their perspective.
Border than Donald Trump is. Too focused on cultural issues like transgender issues rather than helping the middle class. I am not even going to...
I think you're using the term fascist a bit too liberally, Vosh. Boys playing girls sports is a little bigoted, but hardly fascist. I didn't say that rhetoric was fascist. I said the normal people are concerned by this is definitionally fascist rhetoric. Yeah, normal families are concerned with this. That is, like, that was his argument. It wasn't just a supporting point. That was his argument. Normal people are bothered by that. That is. the boys playing in girls sports thing isn't fascist, it's just transphobic.
To say the word transgender in my entire campaign.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
I mean, not that I remember, maybe once, but not that I recall, okay? It was certainly not, I'm not gonna talk about my race, I'm not gonna talk about my gender, I'm gonna run around the country with Liz Cheney and try to persuade you that actually I'm just like basically a Republican. The only way I'm different from Biden is I'm actually further to the right, I'm gonna put Republicans in my cabinet. Like, this is the campaign that Democrats ran, and it was an objective, clear-cut, demonstrable failure. Because as much as I would like politics to actually work this way, because I have a bunch of poll numbers I could put up there about how popular Medicare for All is and how popular minimum wage is and how popular unions are, blah, 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 blah. If that was the way politics actually worked, Kamala Harris would be headed to the White House right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Donald Trump ran around talking about Arnold Palmer's dick. The idea Democrats are the two divisive ones? Are you kidding me?
Also, the Republican campaign was incredibly identity focused. Remember that like month-long period where Donald Trump would not shut up about Kamala Harris's skin color? Like, they constantly talked about Kamala Harris being a woman. And is she black? I don't know. Maybe she is black. Maybe she's not black. Who even knows? And Donald Trump's banger line, I would rather vote for the white guy, me, you know? Yeah, they're eating the castrated dogs. Constant identity grievance politics. But it didn't matter because voters actually love identity politics as long as it's being delivered in a way that creates like a compelling narrative. Nobody is motivated to vote by someone going out there and saying, I'll be the first female president. Okay, that's great. You. Nobody's compelled to vote by going out there and hearing about how the American dream of the heart of the soul of the founders of the patriots of the something of the stars in the night sky, which you can only see when it's darkest of the star. No one gives a shit about that, okay? There are lots of people in America that can resonate with the idea that woke has gone too far, not because it hasn't gone nearly far enough, but rather because it speaks to like grievance politics and creates a narrative of national resurgence and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Trump is the most divisive figure in modern American politics. The lesson is not to be less divisive. The lesson is actually to be more divisive, but around...
I think you could actually make an argument he might be the most divisive American politician in American history. I wonder, it would be between him and McCarthy maybe, because I feel like you could fairly argue that the Confederacy wasn't divisive in the same way, because that was like a regional national secessionary split, whereas in this case, it's like everyone all around the country being turned against one another. So I feel like it's a lot more of a dispersed kind of, like turning against one another. Not sure. It kind of depends on your metrics, you know? Yeah, I don't know if the Civil War counts in the same way, though. I think that's different. How wasn't Reagan more? Have you seen the margins he won by?
The correct lines. So what is Trump's division? And what does he feed? The division and the world view that he feeds into, the narrative that he feeds into with everything he does, the litmus test for being part of Donald Trump's party is the problems in your lives are because of immigrants, Democrats, cultural elites.
Does anyone else feel like their camera settings on this camera are still really weird? Why is it so blown out? It's like really high saturation. See? Look at how like glossy and orange Crystal looks
Your
here.
Lives are because of immigrants, Democrats, cultural elites.
And then she looks normal.
I will fix it, right? Those are the litmus tests within the Republican Party. That is the worldview. It's one I disagree with. I've talked a lot about it, but that is the worldview and is very clear-cut worldview. So when you're talking about things like, transgender issues, that fits into this idea from him. Cultural elites are trying to change you, indoctrinate your kids, take over your life, preach to you about what your values should be. When we're talking about the border, when we're talking about immigrants, these immigrants are going to come into your town and they're going to steal your job.
I don't have much to say before Stogger steps in because Crystal's just straight up killing it here. It's yeah, true. Yorp.
Jobs are going to drive up housing. Again, I think all of this is incorrect, but it's clear cut, right? It is clear cut, and it is extremely divisive. So the problem is not that Democrats were talking about, I don't even remember the last time Democrats talked about transgender issues at all. And it's not that Democrats were too far.
What's that old tweet? Like, if you want to hear about trans people nonstop, unfollow all the trans people that you know and then follow a bunch of Republican politicians and pundits. Literally, they never shut the fuck up about it. Trans people talk about trans people less than transphobes. It's insane.
Right or too far left or whatever. The problem is they have no narrative. They do not have a divisive politics, at least not one that actually works. This is where Bernie Sanders was on the money, okay? Occupy Wall Street, what's the division there? The 99 versus the 1. Bernie Sanders, what's the division? The people broadly versus the millionaires and the billionaires. That's what they need. And so, you know, the guy who was like arguing with Michael on there, who I'm not really familiar with.
Jay Michaels.
The part that he said that was the most important and that should be coming out of Democrats' mouths when they're being pressed on, you know, transgender athletes or whatever, is he said, this is a canard. And that's the important point. How does the 5 transgender athletes in the country, how does that impact you, your ability to have a good life, earn a good wage, etc.? It's a distraction. It's a distraction from billionaire elites who want another tax cut, or, you know, Elon Musk's case, want another like government subsidy, taxpayer subsidized contract. That is what Democrats should be leaning into.
Democrats should also be a lot more aggressive. Keep in mind that, like, a big part of populist messaging, it's not just about staying cohesive on the message, it's about attacking the opposition. One of the big problems with Democrats is they refuse to attack or push any envelopes or take any stand. As far as I can tell, there is literally no consequence to being antagonistic in the current political environment. I can't think the classic Democrat, like, I guess, strategy, or I guess like their logic, their heuristic is that it's generally worse to be divisive and to attack people. But in reality, it seems like it always works. Like, at the very least, there's no consequences to doing it. Kamala Harris refused to attack Trump meaningfully. She did. Let's be fair. No one gives a shit. I'm so tired of people attacking Trump by calling him a criminal. Literally, who the cares? You realize you're only further cementing his populist, like, appeal, right? Oh, he's so anti-establishment that he literally has, like, federal charges against him? No one gives a shit. I don't care whether someone's a criminal. If I was in Florida back, I would have voted for the reenfranchisement of criminal. That's not, like, my metric for it. It's about what he does. Call him a pedo and a rapist? If the pedo thing is off the table and half of America is pro-rape, why not just call him, like, a fat, stupid piece of shit who only cares about himself? I'm not kidding. I'm genuinely... Can you imagine the clips that would be born of that and him blustering afterwards? He insults people all the time on that level. He makes fun. Remember the disabled reporter where he was like, you know, or it was a reporter, you know, but like the disabled guy, and he did that? Or the constant attacks on people's appearances, behavior, how they sound, how they act, everything. Who gives a shit, dude? Populism isn't just about, like, having the right narrative. It's people like Donald Trump should be held in contempt. They should be despised. If Kamala did that, half the Dems in the Senate would denounce that comment and make her walk it back. Yeah, I know, because Democrats are terrible and they like losing. As you were saying, Media Matters did a study and found right-leaning pages posted 77% of those top posts and earned 82% of interactions on them. Additionally, 43% of the most popular posts from all pages were about trans athletes. Jesus. You can get like 57 triple platinum tweets about every single individual trans athlete in the United States. It's insane.
They shouldn't be running away from it. They need their own divisive politics, and they need to throw out this like focus group, poll tested bullshit, because the paint by numbers way of like, let me just poll test my way into what I think is a popular program, utter and complete rejected failure.
So I don't think that any of that is necessarily wrong in terms of the focus group, but on the, I mean, look,
I can't deny the fact that you're right about everything, but I'm still going to find a way to like insist the Democrats are too pro-trans, despite them literally not even bringing it up this election cycle.
I do think it is clear that there is a reality problem the Democrats face. So what you were saying in terms of, you know, oh, Kamala didn't run on it. It's like, yeah, but in 2019, she literally did say you should tax her dollars to, you know, have gender transition.
I'm sorry, 5 years ago, she said something. Are you kidding me, dude? How desperate are you to pretend that this is like an actual forced error from the Democrats? They talked about it too much. Kamala Harris mentioned it once in an interview 5 years ago. Are you being serious right now? He will never admit that it's a manufactured problem, because if he did, he would be admitting that he contributes to that, you know?
Surgery for illegal immigrants. That's objectively an insane thing to believe. Like,
no, it's not. It's pretty straightforward. If you have people in prison, including undocumented immigrants, you're responsible for their health care. That's like law. Not that we follow it consistently, but it's law. And if it's held that gender-affirming surgeries are a component of healthcare, then that follows. Yeah.
These people ran around all throughout
Trump
the
did it during
2019
his administration too, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope he bans it, right now. And
so see how easily he deflects that? That was also the law under the Trump administration. Well, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. It was insane when Kamala Harris mentioned it once in 2019, but when Donald Trump presided over it as law for 4 years as president, that didn't count. Reality doesn't matter, but also here's why Democrats have a reality problem.
By the way, it looks like that's going to be a day one agenda. And so if anything, he's too much an idiot not to follow through. So that's something. But
right. That's the point, because it's a manufactured issue. That's the entire point, you idiot. You didn't hear about it for 4 years. You didn't care about it for 4 years because at the time, it wasn't something you were told to care about. This is the definition of a manufactured issue. You weren't even aware of it being the case for years under Donald Trump's presidency. You didn't even care. It didn't matter. It still doesn't matter. I genuinely prefer like the non-intelligentsia branch of the right wing. I'm using this word like in a derogatory sense because at least they kind of embrace the fact that they're dumb. It's like the Hodge twins or whatever. Like, if you have two people basically soy jacking into the camera about how libs are dumb and, trans people are gross or whatever, at least they're operating on the level of intelligence that their points actually belong on, as opposed to like pretending there's something more substantive there,
Really and also that was Kamala's response. It didn't work. People get tagged because of the cultural milieu. You cannot run, for example.
He's intelligentsia because he knows the word milieu. I mean, his position here might be that it matters, even though no one mentioned it for 4 years under Trump, but it matters that Kamala mentioned it in 2019, which was during the Trump administration, but
In 2022, if Republicans did not say the word abortion, would that not mean that they still get tagged, and rightfully so, with the issue of abortion? Democrats basically...
Difference being that Republicans have always wanted to get rid of legal abortion, which now they have. First of all, they've been talking about it forever. Second of all, they did it. They got the chance to do it and they did it. So all of the talking points pinning them to wanting to revoke the right to an abortion were correct. They were correct the entire time. Whereas the thing you're describing of Kamala Harris was law, and there's no push whatsoever by the Democrats to do anything more in that effect. Why would they need to? The law hasn't changed. Completely made up issue. I don't want to listen to Sagar. I don't really care. Honestly, the takeaway from this, I don't care about him. The takeaway from this, I guess, is just that Crystal was correct. I don't really know what else to do. This is why I don't want to do like, react to conservative video, because it's like you're not, this is why I say media environment. You know what I mean? Because if a person watches enough breaking points that they just take the Sagar's positions, their brain is just cooked and there's not much you can do about it. I feel like these positions are self-evidently incorrect. I might as well watch Flat Earth videos. But that's the breaking points audience. In Georgia, Kamala ran ads saying how she would oppose billionaires, and at the same time ran ads featuring billionaire Mark Cuban where he talks about how he supports their lol. Do we want to talk about how Donald Trump says he's going to protect Social Security while also saying he'll gut it, and also how he'll fight the elites while also being backed by the elites and saying that he'll support the working man, but Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world, is right now in the White House giving him a prostate massage? Like, it doesn't matter. They don't believe in anything. I hate these people. And I don't think they should be able to vote. I'm going to be like polarized against democracy. But Trump never actually said a word about the working man. You're right. My apologies. Fascists never, ever talk about the working man or the working class. They say the middle class, because the middle class still leaves room underneath it for the lower class, which should be held in contempt. They never talk about the poor or the lower class because those groups deserve their poverty and should die on the street. They talk about the middle class as like the, white picket fence, white people in the suburbs, so on and so forth. The working man, the working class, provides like a sense of solidarity. The middle class does not, which is why people like AOC and Bernie talk about the working class. Same with like, Sean Fain or whatever. But people like Kamala Harris talked about the middle class. Middle class has always been a gross category. It's useful in some contexts, but for the most part, yes, I agree.